Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, in the Eastern time zone this time, he is Useful Human and writer for theathletic.com. He is Arif Hassan. Arif, how you doing this interesting Christmas week?
Interesting is a good word for it. Yeah, I'm doing really great. I come down to Burlington every year. I think our longtime listeners know that. And so I record from whatever haphazard fake studio I can set up here. I usually have like a thing that surrounds the microphone with like some sound, baffling material and stuff like that to make it sound a little bit better. And I have hastily constructed something like that to make it sound okay here. Hopefully it's worked.
And I haven't even done that. I just I spent the last 2 weeks moving into a house, and instead of building up a recording space, I decided to spend that time going through and making sure the clip show was done by yesterday. So you get nothing but reflective sound on my part. So this will not be a reflection, pun unintended, of sound going forward. It was unintended. But we will be changing the sound up a little bit here once I build my little shack or whatever in the living room space. But it's what's great about Christmas week is that workplaces tend to be a little bit more lenient about sending people home for bad weather. I'm fairly certain I could have made it to work today, but they're like, nope, we're closing the highway anyway. Nobody wants to be into work anyway, including the chancellor. So nope, we're all out.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough.
Be like, what? It's going to snow like 3 inches? Why does anyone need to go into work?
Right. I mean, how much work gets done between Christmas and New Year's, honestly?
It's minimal at best. I busted my ass yesterday because I knew that there was a real good chance I wasn't going to be in today. So it's like, okay, well, I can rest easy and not have to worry about a darn thing. So let's get into it. Welcome to this show. We have a couple things to go over. We did not get a chance to review the Lions game, the victory over the Lions. So we will be talking about that for a little bit. Also, we have a preview of the Bears game coming up, a very important game with the Bears. Lorin Cox is going to be returning. You may remember him by his fantastic Twitter handle, Cox Sports 1. He'll be back on to talk about differences in the Bears games and try to figure out where the Bears are headed, because they are looking more and more like a juggernaut, as it seems. And we also have a mailbag to talk about as well. So we have plenty of stuff. But before we start, just want to thank you guys so much for listening to the show, for supporting us. There is a show that you can listen to once you're done with this or before this, whenever you want to do it. The clip show is out there. The clip show has a lot of cursing, and it's been suggested that the Patreon money be used toward James getting a swear jar.
I'm not against that.
It's like I don't curse that much. I mean, the thing is, I never curse on the show, so the idea that I curse may be different. To like, oh hey,
I curse different when I know it's for the clip show.
Well,
you're so edgy, James.
Sorry. I have no response to this. I've been roasted by Arif. Throwback to the clip show. But yeah, so the clip show is out there. The clip show is very funny. The clip show is also full of profanity. So if you are not opposed to such thing, the clip show is like an hour and a half of gloriousness, including the uncut Dusty conversation from earlier this year when we brought him on, where we discuss exactly what the hell we're going to be doing, because it wasn't exactly planned, and then the after discussion. So that's pretty entertaining as well. I think if you're a big fan of the show, you should check out at least the last third of that episode. So that is more than worth your time. Also, people who are subscribed to the Patreon get a second clip show, which I'll be putting out by the end of the year. Apologies, it's not out yet, but as it turns out, you cannot move and put out 2 clip shows in the same week. That is
unusual,
against the laws of science, as it turns out. But
I didn't know that. If I had taken science in college, I probably would have.
Or just completed the whole thing. Yeah, it might have been like it's
Right.
actually
Right.
it's actually said to you as you receive your diploma or your certificate.
Right.
Like when I walked the stage, I got my certificate. I smiled for the picture, and then they said, "By the way, you cannot move and do 2 clip shows in the same week." And I'm like, what? Like, keep moving, keep moving. I just thought IPR was weird. It turns out everybody gets that. So, but we do have a couple things to mention here. 2 new donors through Patreon to talk about: Beth Harrington and Christian Cooper. Thank you guys so much again. Really do appreciate it. Patreon is a wonderful tool that allows us to do more of a subscription based, like a sustaining member through an NPR pledge drive sort of thing. So it really does help keep the numbers up and help keep things a little easier to afford through the year. Again, thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate it. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Christian. We also have 2 donations via PayPal to discuss. Both have messages. Colin Scott, thank you, Colin. He says, "Thanks for the great content, Skol Vikes." Thank you, Colin. Appreciate it. And Kyle Slaby sends in a donation with "Happy Festivus. One of you needs to pin me before it can end." Are you going to send me in for this, or are you going to try to take down Kyle?
We have to what?
One of you needs to pin me before it can end. You've seen the Festivus episode of Seinfeld, right?
Yeah, it's been a while, man. I remember like the feats of strength and the airing of grievances.
Well, the feats of strength.
Oh,
is
it's one of the. Oh,
Yep.
Okay. That's what he means by pin.
Yes.
That sounds like a you job.
You're just going to live tweet it. I feel
Right, yeah.
This is
that fits.
This is why you and I make a reasonably decent team on this. Like, I'll live tweet this, potentially make gifs out of the exchanges, and James, you attempt to squish this guy. It works for me. Again, thank you, Kyle. Thanks everyone for helping out with the show for the year. Really do appreciate it. Hopefully we have a couple more shows to talk about where the Vikings are in contention for something. So we're hoping for that and hoping for a little bit here. So before we begin the proper show, sadness befalls the legion of Norse Code fans. As you may know, James lost the Norse Code Fantasy League, which means all of us are no longer the Norse Code Fantasy League champions.
Yeah, it really sucks that all of the listeners lost as well, having contributed in very meaningful ways to our championship run by listening.
Exactly.
So this is unfortunately it's a team loss. All 3 of you lost as well as the 2 of us.
I had a running joke for a while that we had 12 listeners.
Oh, wow, we must have lost 9 on the way.
It's a darn shame. You know what's really crap is that I went through the week going, yeah, Gurley's gonna play, and then I was in a position where I couldn't drop him to get somebody else because everyone on my bench had played. I'm like, oh no, this is well, crap.
That's rough, man.
Yeah, if he would have played and put up 30, I could have won that. Just for the record. Sadly, that's not what ended up happening. So I lost it for you. I lost it for Dusty. I lost it for our 12 listeners. I'm sad. There was also a victory in the not by us, but someone else did end up winning the Norse Code League 2. So both of those people will be allowed to play next year. They are guaranteed their spot, and then we will be drawing for, I believe, it's 9 teams each. So we'll be drawing for 18 spots next year in the month of August. So you too can join the group of people who are wishing death upon kickers and all that. And in fact, I believe my final post to everyone was congrats to everyone who played and congratulations on surviving. Remember, you asked for this. I did not sign anybody up willy-nilly for it.
The idea that the prize for winning this cursed league is automatic entry back into this torture ball. Good Lord. What are we doing?
It's the worst possible gift, and it's the gift that people want. I don't get it. I'm just, if it were me, I'd be tanking, but I'm playing regardless. But yeah, so those people will be allowed back into the league next year automatically. Everyone else will be back into the drawing system. So congrats to those who won. And may God have mercy on your souls. Let's talk Lions game. I was moving, but I did catch the game, and I didn't catch as much of the broadcast, but I did end up catching the game. And the first thing that really stood out was how hopeless everything seemed for about a quarter and a half.
Yeah, and that was really rough. And then defensively, obviously the Vikings held them, I think, in the first 3 drives to 6 points, and then eventually the Lions scored another field goal in the 4th or 5th drive. But it really felt like the amount of points they were giving up was not actually commensurate with their defensive performance, right? Because they were giving up, these explosive plays in midfield, and then, one could say lucking out, or one could say, tightening up or whatever in the red zone when it got close to, scoring territory for the Lions. And so it felt like the Vikings were benefiting from, poor Lions play at the right time, but shooting themselves in the foot to put the Lions in a position to score early on. And, sometimes that was a pass interference call, of course, on Xavier Rhodes, which, it's going to be interesting having this discussion in the offseason about what the true value of Xavier Rhodes is and whether or not he's kind of living up to his contract and all that. But there's that. And then, there's, these big plays, giving up on the ground in the run game and so on. And so it really felt like the Vikings were getting kind of walloped, for the first quarter and a half, like you said. And then it just kind of turned on a dime really quickly in the other direction. And it helps that, of course, the defense kind of held up in the red zone to put the Vikings in a position where the offense finally starts going at a time when they're only down by 6 points, despite it feeling like, they should be down by 14, 17 points, something like that.
It really did feel like a possible Bills scenario where if the defense hadn't shown up the way it did, then this game would have gotten away from us in a very big hurry.
Yeah, and the defense had to show up at very particular times, again, right? Because for them to be able to show up in the red zone, that was really critical. And the Vikings have one of the top red zone defenses in the NFL, if not the top. And I find that kind of an interesting thing because earlier I was remarking, in fact, I wrote in an athletic piece about how the Stefanski offense might look different or change. I was remarking that it's almost inevitable that the red zone offense will be better, not necessarily because the Vikings were very poor at calling red zone plays. They were 23rd in scoring percentage, but a lot of that might be due to variance and variability that you just don't have the ability to control that much of, and so you just might increase your red zone scoring percentage just as a matter of course. And so offensively, red zone scoring percentage is not that stable. But I don't actually know what it's like defensively. It really feels like the Vikings defense in the red zone over the past 3 years has been remarkable, one of the best red zone defenses in the league. That might be a stable thing, and it might be one of the only instances where a defensive metric is more stable than an offensive metric, or the same category offensive metric. But if that's the case, it's a mark of kind of the way the defense is designed and built that they were able to keep the game as close as it was for the offense to, I don't know how you want to say it, get some points on the board, maybe generate some confidence or momentum or however you want to believe it. But allow the offense to get the Vikings back into a competitive atmosphere for the game. So yeah.
And let's start, I guess, with the offense, because the offense sputtering the way it did had a lot of people going, well, it was a nice run, Stefanski, but I wonder who else is going to be picked up in the offseason. It was really it was kind of odd to watch everyone kind of turn so quickly on Stefanski when the offense was struggling the way it was. Why did the offense struggle the way it did?
That's an interesting kind of question. I think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that the scripted plays just happened to work against the Dolphins. They just happened to not work against the Lions, and you ran out of scripted plays after those kind of 3 initial drives. And one of the ways that we know it was a scripted play is they ran the ball on 3rd and 6 or something like that. And so that they weren't kind of calling the plays situationally, right? It was in the script to run the ball there. I thought the offense started getting going in part not because they were running the ball well or establishing the run, but because they just started calling plays against the defense that they were seeing, and a lot of those were good pass plays. Obviously, kind of in the middle of the game, the running game opened back up And you saw a lot of really good runs, especially from Dalvin Cook, who ended up, I think, with 6 yards a carry or something like that. There was a lot, I think, with non-adaptive play calling kind of early in the game, where as kind of the game developed and you kind of saw what was available to you, you kind of called the right plays and were able to be put into a spot. And then also there's something you just have to keep in mind is that because Kirk Cousins is as streaky as he is, these things will just kind of appear and we might just look for explanations where we might be thinking too much. And the explanation simply is, sometimes he just gets in a rut and he has 5 incompletions in a row. 5 incompletions in a row can easily materialize in a run heavy 3-drive set. Right. So,
all of a sudden you have 3 and outs in a row.
Exactly. Right. And it may not be because of, the way the offensive coordinator is calling plays or the way that the Lions defense is shaping up or putting pressure or whatever, which, by the way, I think that early on in the game there was a pretty good deal of pressure, which by the end of the game there was very little pressure at all. So it kind of all just evened out. That might be part of it too. It might not have anything to do with the play calling. It might just have to do with the kind of the variance that you get in a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who then hit some streaks kind of in the second and third quarter. So those all might play a role too.
Well, let's talk about the play that broke the Lions. The Hail Mary to, it was caught by Kyle Rudolph. I don't know if it was to anyone in particular, but it was caught by Kyle Rudolph. I guess I did end up messaging my buddy who lives in Detroit and said something along the lines of, why is the Hail Mary, why are the Lions so susceptible to the Hail Mary play? Like, it might almost be worth making sure to do that at least once a game. Why did that play work?
Right. I think a lot of it actually just has to do with the way the Lions defense was set up. And maybe I have to watch the play, a third or fourth time or something like that. But I don't know that the Lions defensively are necessarily just super subject to Hail Mary plays, because that I think that Rodgers one was under kind of a different defensive setup. But in this specific play, it felt like the 2 receivers on that side of the field that were trailing down were being followed by 3 defensive backs, and one of them was behind Rudolph, so he's just not in position. And so those other defensive backs didn't show up until Diggs kind of angled towards the play from the other side of the field. And so those other defensive backs don't show up until very late. And I just think that that's really poor defensive design. Like, obviously you have to cover Diggs. Like, but you can't only have 3 defensive backs back there as you begin to jump up for the ball, when one of them is just obviously going to be out of position. So now it's 2 for 2, which historically that's a win for the offense. I think it was mostly on the Lions. Obviously, Rudolph being in the right place, tracking the ball, jumping with great timing, Cousins throwing it in the right spot. All of that is very important and critical to the play being successful. But I think that kind of the biggest contributor was that the Lions really screwed that up.
And it just keeps happening to them. I'd love to see the number of Hail Mary plays that have worked against the Lions over the past, I want to say 4 seasons. Because I know the Packers have like 2, and it just keeps. When you see it go up against the Lions, like, there's a real good shot that this is going to work.
The one at the beginning of the year with the Packers, I mean, that was just incredible, right? Like, that was just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
The one a couple of years ago with Rodgers, I don't know, man. Do those count? Like, can we say that the Lions are bad against Hail Marys when it's like 2 lasers from Rodgers?
Well, when it involves Kirk Cousins, yes, I do believe that you can actually.
now we can say before, that was just Rodgers, but now it's Cousins.
There might have been outliers. Like, okay, well, Rodgers is throwing. Oh, Brady threw 40 or threw one up in the air from like 55 yards out. Okay, fine. It's right around the time that like Jameis Winston is able to throw. Okay, not Jameis Winston. Ryan Fitzpatrick is able to throw something from a laser from 60 yards out and be like, oh, okay, well, the Lions are terrible at this. You might as well just try this once a down, or like once a drive.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you might as well once a down. Yeah.
Little bit of a difference there, I suppose.
I guess make them make it a bad play before you stop. I don't know, why not? Try it. If the Lions are going to continue to give up Hail Mary touchdowns, see what happens until they don't, right?
Yeah, it's the whole like the Vikings for whatever reason this year it seems like when the Vikings get the ball with like 50 seconds left and it's the second quarter, and even if they're not going to get the ball back at for the top of the third, they just kneel out and they're done. Why not go for it if you're going against the Lions? It seems like there's a history of it paying off. So after this catch, after this score, it really seemed like a completely different ball game. That the Lions could not do a thing against the Vikings defense, and that the offense for the Vikings was pretty much in a position of just putting it in cruise control and just going.
Yeah. I mean, the offense just felt like it had figured everything out, right? Like you said, like they were in cruise control and just going. It was like an open highway. No one was going to be in their way. It just felt like the offense was pretty successful no matter what they were trying to do. They were really efficient passing the ball. They were really efficient running the ball. At some point, they had averaged something like 8 yards a carry until it came time to like kill the clock at the end, and then they dropped back down to 6. It was a shellacking. Like, it was a really good showing for Stefanski, who demonstrated against the Dolphins that, he did a very good job, scripting plays and crafting an opening that set the Vikings up for success. They struggled through the second and third quarter, and then they came back and put some extra points up on the board in the fourth. And this is kind of the opposite, right? Where they struggled early on. He was able to adapt and craft an offense that was able to kind of get the job done and then close out the game. A lot of this might have to do with Stefanski, the offensive coordinator. There was a lot of really good stuff in that game. I thought Adam Thielen played, really well. Cousins, obviously, he was able to craft some efficient streaks in there, and so on. And Kyle Rudolph just had a monster game, right after Pro Bowl voting closed too. So just in time. But yeah, I mean, he ended up with like over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, I think.
Well, the Hail Mary will certainly help with that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I was like, Rudolph's having a really rough game, right? Because he was struggling a lot kind of early in the game. He gave up some run blocks. I think he dropped a ball. He had a couple of false, like 2 penalties, I think. One of them was a false start. Just a really rough game. And then, he responds with, okay, so the 1 touchdown, you're like, well, okay, that's a Hail Mary. Like, that doesn't really kind of give us a reasonable comparison for the nature of his game. And then the rest of the game, he has over 100 yards. I think it's 120 yards, something like that, and then another touchdown. And you're like, well, okay, net positive, I guess. Net positive. But yeah, no, there was a lot of really great play from a lot of players that, Aldrick Robinson played well. A lot of players that you want and need to play well if you're crafting, a playoff run. And so I'm not going to say a lot of players that you wouldn't expect it from, because you do expect good games from Rudolph and Robinson and so on. But, you expect the primary targets to be, Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, and kind of have the offense run through them, and then kind of the rest of the offense kind of catch up. And sometimes it's just not going to work. And so it was really good to see great play from complementary pieces like Rudolph, like Robinson, and to some extent Cook. It's kind of difficult to call him a complementary piece, but it's also difficult to call him a primary piece at this point. So yeah, it was a great showing by more than role players, less than star players. How about that?
So what about the offensive line? This wasn't a game where Cousins was getting sacked all that much, but how did the offensive line hold up?
Yeah, I thought the offensive line held up really well. Like I said, kind of early on in the game, it felt like they weren't doing very much, and they kind of responded in a big way. I think on balance, you could say Tom Compton had a really poor game, which to some degree isn't a surprise, right? Because, he's been kind of somebody we've been worried about all year, but to a different kind of degree, he's been overperforming our expectations all year. And so for him to underperform like this, it's kind of disappointing, because it would have been kind of cool if they just stumbled on a journeyman who ended up being kind of a starting quality. Maybe not like a Joe Berger type journeyman becomes a really high level guard, but journeyman becomes an acceptable starting guard where maybe that's not a need anymore. And, with games like this, you get kind of concerned that, maybe that this, this isn't like, the kind of gem find that you would have wanted. So, he struggled. But otherwise, I think the final PFF grade puts Cousins at what, 6 dropbacks under pressure on 28 dropbacks or something like that. Like a really good showing by the offensive line, and that's. I wouldn't say that's 2 good showings in a row. You know, me and PFF kind of disagree about the nature of the Dolphins game. And Nicholas Olson, we talked about this too on Twitter about how much pressure Cousins was under. I thought Cousins was under pressure a lot early in the game, and then kind of late in the game, it kind of cohered where Nicholas thought it was kind of the opposite. I ended up asking PFF, and they were like, well, you have to be a team to get quarter-by-quarter breakdowns, and you have to pay for it. I'm like, oh, come on, dudes. So I didn't get the quarter-by-quarter breakdown. But if PFF is to be believed on both of these games, it's 2 good showings by the offensive line in a row, which that doesn't seem like it would be a coincidence, right? But I also couldn't tell you kind of what influence Stefanski versus John DeFilippo have on the offense. Like, I don't know what the mechanism for that would be, because it's not like DeFilippo's calling like a bunch of 7-step dropbacks and stuff like that. So yeah, it was another great showing by the offensive line. I thought, we ended up seeing really good pass protection from basically everyone but Tom Compton. Like, I was just going to list all the offensive linemen, but it's basically everyone but Tom Compton. I think
poor Tom Compton.
Poor Tom. Riley Reef ended up giving up a sack, but I think that was either the only pressure he gave up all game or one of 2 pressures he gave up all game. And then Mike Remmers, kind of played well, and he was struggling a lot early in the season. So, that was good to see. Brian O'Neill, obviously, he ended up playing really well. He might be the best performing offensive lineman right now. Pat Elflein, I think he got a poor PFF grade, and I think that most of that was for run blocking. But I think overall, he did a pretty good job too, especially in pass protection, which you don't see a ton because he's been kind of struggling in pass protection. But this was a good showing by him. So I thought that the OL held up, and that's kind of what you need to see heading into the playoffs if the Vikings make the playoffs, which seems more likely than not at this point.
Well, we can certainly hope anyway. Let's talk defense. This was a game where it didn't feel like we were able to get to Matt Stafford nearly as often as would have been expected.
Yeah, I think, we were coming off a game with 9 sacks. The last game they played Matt Stafford, there were 10. In this one, sacks just weren't arriving until late in the game. I think they all came in the second half, if not 2 of the 3 or something like that.
Yep, all in the second half.
Yeah, so and that was kind of frustrating. There was this question about, I remember during the game, there was this question about how much pressure they were even getting. And honestly, I thought that the Lions offensive coordinator, the JBC, Jim Bob Cooter, had kind of accounted for the holy crap, we're going to get hit a lot. And so they got rid of the ball quickly. Some people were saying, the defensive line's not getting very much pressure. And, this Lions offensive line is a little injured, so you kind of expect them to get a little bit more. That always reminds me of way back when the Vikings played the Atlanta Falcons, I want to say in 2014, and they ran out of offensive linemen, so they just threw a big tight end in at tackle, and we were like, oh, yeah, Everson Griffin's going to get it. And then they got like 1 more sack for the rest of the game. We were just like, dang. In this game, I think that the defensive line did end up getting a lot of pressure. I can check the PFF pressure percentage for the Lions in this game, but I do think they ended up getting it's a fair amount. It's 8 of 34, so it's a decent amount of pressure. But yeah, the amount of pressure was not kind of commensurate with the amount of sacks that ended up showing up early in the game. The Vikings ended up getting one, I think, from Eric Wilson, I think Danielle Hunter ended up finally getting one too. You got one from Eric Wilson, and you got one from Everson Griffin, which is always good to see. And then late in the game of Matt Castle, you had Kentrell Brothers get a sack. So. It took a while for the defensive line to show up, but I think that pressure kind of resulted in really good outcomes for the defensive backs. Another really great showing, I think, from the secondary. We saw a really great game from Harrison Smith, a phenomenal game from Mackenzie Alexander, and so on.
And we didn't have any missed kicks from Dan Bailey, so I think we can. Every time I say this, every time I say this, something terrible happens. So apologies, but we might be able to close the book on this for the season. We might.
He said it right before the end of the season.
Yes.
That's the most dangerous shit you've ever done, dude.
No, taking the beer from the Jets fan at the recording was one of the more dangerous things.
That was pretty dangerous. He was on to you every time you like marked down like, oh, I gotta edit this out.
In case you haven't listened, I did include the whole dude. Don't edit me out of this. To which the table exploded in laughter. So
that was so good. But he's made all of his kicks over the last 2 games. Great. That's a trend that hopefully continues. We'll see. I don't know. I said
we'll take it.
I wrote that it's more likely than not that he's going to make 90% of his kicks than 70% of his kicks, even though that's kind of what his it's more likely than not than either that he makes like 80% for the rest of the season, but it's much more likely that he hits 90 than 70. So, that seems to be kind of what he's doing. So I'm glad to be right about that. We're entering a game where that's going to be like more important, right? Because the Vikings only would have won by like 15 against the Dolphins, and they only would have won by like 8 against the Lions without those kicks. So like, they still would have won by pretty significant margins. And this Bears game is going to be kind of closer. So hopefully, he makes those kicks when it matters, I guess.
Yeah, there's an expectation against the Bears that it could do the whole like bend but not break, and if we get within 40 yards, there's gonna be a lot of kicking opportunities, but we have to get within those 40 yards anyway. But that's a discussion for a little bit later with Lorin. Is there anything else we should say to kind of put a bow on the game here? Obviously, this was an important win. This was necessary to keep any hope of playoffs alive. Is there anything else that we need to say about it?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough to be engaged in the game by the end, which is a good thing. It means that the Vikings have been playing really well.
Honestly, it was difficult to be engaged in the beginning of it too, but that was for completely different reasons.
I want to say the running concepts that they used a lot of duo in the Dolphins game to great success. In this game, they mixed a lot more zone and duo type runs for successful runs. So I'm kind of curious kind of what they'll do going forward, because they're a zone team and they want Dalvin Cook to play in a zone. He's a zone style running back. And so we'll kind of see what's being done to improve the run game, not just running more. So that's the thing I'm curious about going forward.
Well, let's get into the Bears preview. We had him on earlier this season. He is Lorin Cox of Cox Sports 1 fame on Twitter. Part of the Locked On Bears podcast. So let's go to an interview that Arif conducted earlier today.
All right, yeah. So here I have with me Lorin Cox at Cox Sports 1, still the best Twitter handle in the universe. So he, you could say he's Locked On Bears' Lorin Cox. He also writes for NBC Sports Chicago, Bears Wire at USA Today, also Pro Football Focus. He's like a contact point. What do you do at PFF, actually?
So I'm an analyst, more of the part-time analyst. There's only a few of us that do it on the side, but wear a lot of hats there as well.
Sure. All right. So obviously Lorin here, we had him on the previous show, so you know how good his analysis can be. But, he does a lot of film breakdown and stuff like that. So we're happy to have him. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm a little short on sleep at the moment, but hey, anything for you, Arif.
Great. I'll make this as long as possible then. All right, well, let's get right into it. Last time, I think we started with the offense, so let's start with the defense, which is more interesting to talk about anyway when it comes to the Bears. So I haven't looked at a Bears injury report, so I'm like woefully underinformed here. But from my understanding, the only notable injury to worry about is at nickel corner. Is that right?
Well, so their nickel cornerback, Bryce Callahan, is on injured reserve, and that was a couple weeks ago that he went down. But Eddie Jackson at safety, he hurt his ankle 2 weeks ago when he intercepted Aaron Rodgers to break Aaron Rodgers' streak of consecutive unintercepted passes. And on that return, he went down with an ankle injury.
He's on that Harrison Smith wave. Oh, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Jackson went down with an ankle injury on that interception return. Didn't play last week. Is questionable for this game most likely. He hasn't practiced yet this week. And I'm guessing he's not going to give it a go. So he'll probably sit out with Deion Bush taking his place. And then Aaron Lynch, the number 3 outside linebacker, formerly of 49ers fame, I guess.
Yeah.
He also suffered an elbow injury in that same game that looked pretty bad, and he's probably not going to practice this week or play in this game. But if these two teams play again the following week in the first round of the playoffs, I would expect both of those guys to be back out there.
Right. South Florida, right, Aaron Lynch?
I think so. That's a good question. Yes, South Florida.
I mostly bring it up
pick.
because the Ourlads chart lists, that the Bears acquired him from San Francisco, but B, that he was an unrestricted free agent, and so it's U/SF, and I was just, that's kind of interesting. He also went to USF. That's a boring story. Let's move on.
The thing is, I have that same Ourlads page up for every time I do a podcast, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I've got the Bears and the Vikings one up sitting on my screen right now.
That's great. So I'm glad at least this particular audience of 2 appreciated that observation. Let's talk a little bit about that defensive line, because I think it seems like for the Bears, as stunning as that secondary is, with Kyle Fuller, you mentioned Eddie Jackson, Adrian Amos, and the other one, Prince Amukamara. That's it. Yeah. The Ourlads chart is off to the side. I'm not looking at it right now. It seems like, despite kind of how stunning the secondary is, a lot is being made of kind of what they can do up front, especially now that you've had Khalil Mack healthy for more than 2 games. I think is what he was at when he played the Vikings, and he's kind of back to being Khalil Mack. You've got Akeem Hicks, who's kind of one of the more underrated 3 techniques. Eddie Goldman, not even named by Sean McVay. What is that? And
he got a safety in that game, so Sean McVay missed out.
Right, yeah, exactly. It might have been his fault, honestly.
Yeah.
Whatever happens at the other pass rusher / defensive end spot, Ourlad says it's Bilal Nichols. Who knows? Why don't you let me know kind of what they've been doing up front? Because, you've got Vic Fangio, you've got, an incredible defensive mind that might just stay a defensive mind, maybe won't ever get a head coaching job, who knows? But you've got an incredible defensive mind working with incredibly talented players. What's he doing to kind of unleash as much as he can from these players?
So it's not necessarily any secret trick or formula or sets of stunts and blitzes, and I think it's a lot of times it's just talented players making plays and letting them get decent matchups by maybe moving guys around a little bit here and there. But a lot of times it's just Akeem Hicks beats a blocker and Khalil Mack beats a blocker, and they just line up at their positions and they go out and do it. There's not always a lot to it, but it is the Mack and Hicks show. By far, both are named to the Pro Bowl, both having very strong seasons. Eddie Goldman in the middle, like you mentioned, an underrated player that doesn't get a lot of credit because he's kind of the dirty work guy. He's taking double teams all the time in the running game, and as a pass rusher, a lot of times he's kind of just containing in the top of the pocket, taking 2 guys so Hicks can get that one-on-one from the 3 tech, and maybe Khalil Mack can only have 3 guys trying to block him on the right side instead of 4, and it's just kind of a ripple effect from there, and it really is those 2 guys. Then Leonard Floyd, he's picked up some sacks this year, working on some stunts and looping in. He's not necessarily still the guy that is just going to beat your offensive lineman one-on-one with a nice move. He's still a little bit limited from a pass rushing repertoire and being able to mix counter moves in with what he can do. But it is the Mack and Hicks show, and it's just remarkable how it doesn't seem like teams have been able to really consistently stop the 2 of them. Maybe you can kind of slow down one or the other, but rarely is it both, and then when it is both, there's usually somebody else kind of there to step up and fill in. So there is some moving around by Fangio of putting them next to each other or moving Floyd kind of to more of an inside linebacker look and getting some stuff going. But for the most part, it's just he lets those 4 guys get after the quarterback, and they do a darn good job.
What games have they both been relatively bottled up?
I honestly can't sit here and point to one example. The main thing was like when Khalil Mack was hurt. There were some times when Akeem Hicks wasn't necessarily able to fully pick up the slack for him. I think back to like kind of the Patriots game and a little bit of the Jets game, but not. It was still a pretty decent performance from Hicks there. So for the most part, it really hasn't happened. But it's, I guess, a little bit back and forth with the injury thing when Mack either wasn't on the field or was on the field, but really not playing at 100%.
All right, well, we're going to talk about the linebackers and then the secondary, but first, I just want to know, what do you think is kind of a bigger driver of the Bears' defensive success? The defensive line or the secondary? You're a PFF guy, so the company line is it has to be the secondary, right? But on like from what you're watching, like what do you feel like has a bigger impact?
Yeah, I think the analytics might say that the cornerbacks have a bigger impact on expected points per play or whatever, but I see this Bears defense as a pass rushing first and foremost team that I think that has the biggest ripple effect on the rest of the defense, that it's what allows this secondary to play so well, that and when they haven't been able to consistently generate a pass rush, you see the secondary drop off significantly. So it's all about Mack and Hicks getting pressure on the quarterback, which allows Fuller and Amukamara and company to be more aggressive on routes. And you'll see them jump a lot of routes, even when the ball's not thrown their way. When they see somebody make a break, they're confident enough to be able to kind of step up and be able to try and make a play on a potential pass because they know or they trust that the quarterback isn't going to have enough time to pull it back in and let the play develop further downfield and potentially burn them on that route that they just jumped on. So I think the pass rush creates the confidence for the secondary, which creates the playmaking and ripples out from there.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about the linebackers, because I think this is kind of an interesting question. So you said that, the way the defensive line is structured, it's in some ways, pass rush first. They're astoundingly good against the run. Is it the fact that, you stop the run along the way to get to the quarterback, or the linebackers playing a pretty significant role? It always feels like, the linebackers are not kind of performing up to the level of talent of the unit in front of them and the unit behind them.
Yeah, it's largely the defensive lineman. It's Hicks, it's Goldman, and I guess Khalil Mack at the outside linebacker position. I mean, both Hicks and Mack might be better against the run than they are as pass rushers, despite being pretty prolific pass rushers themselves. But yeah, the linebackers themselves, they've been playing well. I mean, they're not struggling by any means, but they're not going above and beyond to make plays in the running game. Like, I know everyone loves to point to tackle stats, and both of these linebackers have a lot of tackles, and it's because the defensive line is taking up blocks and clearing up lanes for them. But you look at just like, Roquan Smith has 116 tackles, and he's approaching the Bears rookie record, but so many of those tackles come 6 or 7 yards downfield, and a lot of them are just after the catch in pass coverage. So they're cleaning up, and they're kind of taking what the defensive line sets them up for, but it's largely a front four that's being so effective in run defense, and the linebackers just kind of doing their job and taking what the defensive line creates for them.
Yeah, Colts fans are telling me that total tackles are the premier stat by which to judge linebackers. So, sorry, there's a Darius Leonard shot for some reason. I'm sorry, guys. But so Roquan Smith, you mentioned him. Who holds the rookie? Is it Brian Urlacher? Does he hold the rookie record?
Yeah, I believe so. But I should know that more concretely.
Yeah,
but I'm 90% sure it's Brian Urlacher.
So is he better than Brian Urlacher?
Is he better than Brian Urlacher? Yes, Brian Urlacher's rookie season, 8 sacks, 2 picks, 5 PDs, 125 tackles, 16 tackles for loss. Yeah, Roquan's not he made the Pro Bowl that year as well. Roquan is a Pro Bowl alternate, but no, he's not there yet. You can see he's still thinking a little bit too much on the field, and it's a lot better than it was week 1 when he came in after having sat out all of training camp. But it's clear that he's still getting totally 100% comfortable, and that it will be what allows him to take best advantage of his elite athletic ability. And I think once he's much more comfortable and locked in, then you're going to start to see him make some of those bigger plays that we saw at Georgia.
Our friend Charles McDonald compared him to Eric Kendricks coming out of the draft. Chuck is a huge Georgia fan, maybe reluctant Georgia fan is maybe a better way to put it. But he's somebody I kind of trust when it comes to Georgia football player evaluations and evaluations in general. How do you feel, assuming that we're talking about kind of Eric Kendricks at his best and not some of the stuff we've seen from him this year, how do you feel about that comparison based off of what you've seen in the NFL for Roquan Smith thus far?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think a lot of Bears fans would feel like that's too low of a comparison. I mean, Eric Kendricks is a yeah, I know Eric Kendricks is a fine linebacker, but I don't think people in Chicago recognize how good he's been and also have extremely high expectations for Roquan Smith as a top 10 pick, as an elite athlete at the position. I mean, there are people that want him to be basically Brian Urlacher, but maybe that's a little bit unfair, but potentially like
a tiny bit
Pro
unfair.
Bowl every year type, all pro, maybe future Hall of Fame linebacker. And I mean, there is some of that ceiling there, but I think Kendricks is maybe more of a a more realistic and certainly, solid starting linebacker in the NFL.
All right. So let's talk about Danny Trevathan. At the time when he was signed, I thought it was a coup for the Bears. And I think the Bears have had like 3 consecutive good off seasons. So I guess it's all kind of coming to fruition. But he hasn't played like astoundingly well, right?
There's been some up and down for sure, but he's been very, very solid. I mean, kind of like he was in Denver. I mean, I think he was a little bit better in Denver, but for I guess a while he had a better defense around him until now. But yeah, he's holding up in coverage fine. I mean, he's always been a pretty good linebacker in coverage, but he's not elite and plays well in run defense, can take on blocks and doesn't miss too many tackles. And he just seems to do everything well, but nothing great at this point in his career. And he has struggled with injuries throughout his career, and he's been able to stay healthy this year for kind of the first time in a while. So I think the Bears are pretty happy with that and riding what they've been getting from him. And he's certainly a leader in the middle of the defense. So, yeah, I mean, he's kind of in that, I would dare I say nearing that Eric Kendricks of like really solid linebacker, but not quite Pro Bowl caliber linebacker.
All right, fair enough. I mean, like, you don't need a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker when you've kind of got this defensive talent surrounding you. And as our another mutual friend, Justice Mosquito, would say, linebackers are trained pigs. It doesn't matter. A little harsh. I don't necessarily agree, but I see where he's coming. He's a defensive line guy anyway. Let's talk about the secondary a little bit. Who is the best member of the Bears secondary, and why?
I thought you were saying, and why is it Eddie Jackson? Yes, it is. It is far and away Eddie Jackson, and I'm not just saying that because he is Pro Football Focus's highest graded safety this year, but he is legitimately playing really, really, really well. And it's not only about his ability to take a turnover and turn it into a touchdown. Among the better safeties with the ball in his hands, and I think we had seen some of that back at Alabama when he was a returner. He only has two pick sixes this year and 1 fumble recovery for a touchdown this year, and he's just phenomenal on that back end. You really don't see quarterbacks test him very much in that deep middle of the field. A lot of times it's trying to get on Kyle Fuller and Prince Amukamara one-on-one on the outsides because Jackson's just kind of that no-fly zone in the middle. And when they do try and push up the seams, his range and recovery just seems to be getting better and better, and being able to even kind of bait quarterbacks in the sense where like you're not even totally sure if he's doing it on purpose or if he's actually just that good at recovering. And I'm telling you, he is playing phenomenally. There's definitely some Earl Thomas light to him with the way he's played this season. I'm not ready to put him quite in that level, but there's a reason he too is headed to the Pro Bowl and has 6 interceptions this season already, despite missing a game so far, and probably going to miss another one here. He's a turnover machine. He's a playmaker, and he's really the big guy on the back end that kind of holds it all together in the secondary.
So if Deion Bush plays, as you kind of anticipate happening, how does that impact the Bears' defense? What are the drop-offs? What are the kind of opportunities that might open up for the Vikings offense?
Yeah, so Deion Bush is definitely an average at best NFL safety. And, last week against the 49ers, it was Nick Mullins. So, I mean, Nick Mullins is playing well for a third-string quarterback, but it's still Nick Mullins. So it was hard to gauge exactly, how that's going to translate against Kirk Cousins if, depending on what the Vikings want to do offensively. I think there's going to be more opportunities in those seams, and I think it gives the quarterback, that extra second of time to fire in a tighter window. Those vertical windows just open up a little bit more because Bush is not – I mean, he's much more of your strong safety type. He's a big hitter. He's a decent tackler and likes to come down in the box, but it's kind of like having 2 Adrian Amoses on the field now, which they can both hold up on the deep end, and they're both going to be asked to do that. And if anything, it maybe gives Vic Fangio a little bit more flexibility to feel like, well, as much as he would want to leave Eddie Jackson on that deep end as much as possible, now it doesn't really make a huge difference for him. So he can maybe rotate the safeties a little bit more. And I don't have concrete numbers to say that he did that more against the 49ers, but it was also a little bit of a different kind of approach against that quarterback in that offense. So, I think the Bears are a little bit more vulnerable downfield with Bush there, but he's not a particular huge liability. It's just that lack of playmaking and that lack of fear from quarterbacks. I think you're going to see Kirk Cousins potentially have a little bit more confidence to take some of those shots and potentially have a little bit more room to squeeze those in.
All right, that all makes sense. Kind of excited to see some more aggressive play style like we've been getting the last couple of weeks from Cousins. So, hopefully that materializes. When you take a look at sort of what had kind of evolved with Kyle Fuller, I think what his first game as a rookie was like phenomenal, and then he just kind of sucked a lot. Right? I mean, I'm right? Like that, he was a liability after that first game as a rookie. And then I think they decided not to option him for his fifth year, which I think at the time, given the available evidence, and correct me if I'm wrong about this timeline, but that seemed like the right decision. Then they had to transition tag him, and then they had to give him a deal. Is that what happened?
See, I'm forgetting which type of tag they used this offseason. I think it was the transition tag. But yeah, so rookie year, a little bit thrown into the fire, made some nice turnovers. Had 4 picks that year and 3 forced fumbles, but was also a bit vulnerable at times in coverage. And then, yeah, kind of sucked a little bit. His second year, missed all of his third season with a weird knee injury that they said it was a real minor, arthroscopic knee surgery in the preseason to clean it out, and then missed the entire season with it. And there was some kind of bad blood with he and the defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio. Fangio kind of saying, well, players got to play through injuries, and you got to be tough in this league, and basically just throwing Kyle Fuller under the bus. But then, of course, comes back last year, has a pretty strong season, only 2 picks, but really a lot more reliable in coverage. 22 pass breakups as well was a nice year for him, and has really followed that up this year. 7 picks, is currently first in the NFL, or at least tied for first, as well as his 21 pass breakups. And the playmaking is there, that the coverage is still very solid, but he has had some games of a little bit of vulnerability. I think back to the Dolphins game, he gave up a touchdown and a lot of yards and everyone missed a lot of tackles in the game, but even last time the Bears and Vikings played, I think PFF had him with 14 targets, 10 catches, and 80 yards. The teams have been able to throw at him a little bit, and especially if the pass rush is struggling to get home for whatever reason, he tends to be the one that's a little bit more vulnerable because he plays so much off coverage. The Prince of Mukamara, he is, physical at the line of scrimmage up and not giving receivers a lot of space from the snap, but Fuller is the off coverage guy. He's keeping his eyes on the quarterback, and teams have opted at times to just kind of take the free space. If you're going to be 7 yards off, they'll just run the slant in front of you, and that goes in against Kyle Fuller's coverage numbers, even though it wasn't necessarily something he did wrong. It was just kind of his alignment on the play, and Fangio has been more than happy to continue to keep playing him in off coverage, and I think it's helped him limit potentially big plays downfield for the most part this season, but there is they're more willing to just kind of give up the easy catches underneath, and I think that's kind of what the Bears want to limit teams to, and maybe sometimes that does make Fuller look a little bit worse, but for the most part, playing a strong season. Obviously, the turnovers are big, and I believe he too is headed to the Pro Bowl here for the first time in his career.
They're going to pay him, and how much?
They did. The Packers signed him to a poison pill 4-year, $50 million deal, and the Bears matched it. So he's locked in. Prince of Mukamara is locked in for 3 years, Fuller for 4. Adrian Amos is actually the one that doesn't have a contract for next year.
Interesting. All right. So given kind of the different, styles of play / alignments that Mukamara and Fuller have, how do you expect that to translate to how they decide to cover Thielen and Diggs?
So, the Fangio's defense is very much we don't necessarily care I don't want to say we don't care what you're going to do. We're just going to do our thing. But you don't really see them from a secondary standpoint mix it up all that much. I mean, they play a lot of their single high coverages, and, cover 3 and cover 1, and they kind of dare you to pass protect long enough to be able to beat this defense and be able to out throw. I mean, if you can make some really pinpoint accurate throws downfield, there will be opportunities. I mean, the Bears have gotten away with facing some poor quarterback play. And, Aaron Rodgers was a couple weeks ago left multiple touchdowns on the field that this secondary had given up, but just inaccurate throws left them out there. So, I would expect some potential, downfield throwing, especially as the Vikings offense has gotten more aggressive here since the rest in peace John DeFilippo era. So I think they like to be able to kind of keep some of that space, particularly, with Diggs downfield. But that didn't stop Stephon Diggs in the first matchup. I think 13 catches for 126 yards, and a lot of that was against Kyle Fuller. There were those opportunities deep on the outside, and it's a matter of, like I said, I always say it comes back to that pass rush that I think Fuller can get burned on some double moves. I think he did against Diggs in the first game. Wasn't there one? Am I remembering right? Like in the first quarter, Diggs smoked him on a double move, and Kirk Cousins overthrew him in the end zone. And then like, later on in the game, they came back to it and got him or something. I don't remember exactly, but there is vulnerability here in those cornerbacks. And if Kirk Cousins gives them a chance to make a turnover, they will. But if he can be on the ball and throw accurately downfield and stay aggressive, there will be opportunities, I think, for Diggs and Thielen. It's just a matter of can the Bears contain them enough to give Trubisky and the offense enough chance to stay ahead on the scoreboard.
Dalvin Cook is 5th in the NFL in broken tackles per rushing attempt, as PFF Neil tweeted out and then had to correct because he had the wrong column in there. Which shouts to Neil, great guy. But
very much so.
Actually,
math not his strong suit. He's good at being British.
Right, he's extremely good at that and being yoked as hell.
Oh yeah, so his gym, he has a home gym, and they call it Gainesville. like Gainz, Gainesville,
yeah.
and people at the PFF office work out at like 5 a.m. Everyone goes to Gainesville in the morning.
Oh my god,
just a great guy.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway.
So Dalvin Cook, top 5 in like missed tackles per rushing attempt, or missed tackles forced per rushing attempt. I think top 5 in PFF's elusive rating. Is that going to be an issue for the Bears? I mean, I know that you think Cook is a really good player, but the Bears have been pretty good at tackling. It seems like when push comes to shove, what is the kind of outcome here?
It's purely, I think, a trench thing, and maybe that sounds more obvious than it maybe is. But it's about Akeem Hicks, Eddie Goldman, Khalil Mack, Leonard Floyd winning right at the line of scrimmage. Because if Dalvin Cook can kind of get, maybe not even the second level, but like the 1.5 level, somewhere between the first level and the second level, I think there's going to be some space there because, Trevathan and Smith have missed some tackles this year, maybe a little bit more than you might expect. But the defensive line has been solid, and the outside linebackers and even the secondary for the most part, with the exception of Eddie Jackson, has missed a few too many tackles. That's kind of the one negative of his season this year. So, I mean, like I said, Roquan Smith and Trevathan have a bunch of these tackles, but they're all 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yards downfield. So it's all about breaking through that initial line of scrimmage of wherever that ends up with the offensive versus the defensive line. And if Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman and Khalil Mack can continue to really set that line of scrimmage a few yards in the backfield and make that first contact early on, then there won't necessarily be a ton of room for Dalvin Cook. But if he can get through that initial burst through the line of scrimmage consistently, he's going to have room to work. And it's just a matter of, how much does that ultimately carry this Vikings offense? How well are they able to execute in the red zone in particular? Because the Bears have given up plenty of yards between the 20s this year. I mean, Nick Mullins and the 49ers got into the red zone 3 or 4 times and, could not score a touchdown in that game. So I think it's going to come down to red zone execution because I do think Cook will be able to move the ball and keep the ground game going between the 20s, and Cousins will find some space to go. And it's just a matter of, okay, when the field gets a lot shorter, there's not really much room for Dalvin Cook to run, and there's not a lot of space for these receivers and not a lot of space for Kirk Cousins to throw. And that ultimately, I think, is going to be the key for scoring points on this Bears defense.
Okay. Before we head over to the offense, how many points did the Vikings score?
Let's see. Last time it was 20-25. I was expecting something around the 21 range. I don't have a great feel for how the Bears are necessarily going to play this because we haven't even talked about. There's a possibility that the Bears will rest some starters at halftime, and then that could impact the final score. So I would say
let's start with the assumption that the Bears are. Yeah, exactly. Let's start with that assumption, then have that discussion kind of at the end.
Yeah. So I would expect around the 20-21 to maybe 24 if maybe the lack of Eddie Jackson makes the deep game a little bit less vulnerable and the Vikings can kind of keep the offensive line together and maybe get some up tempo passing and getting rid of the ball quickly. There's some wiggle room against this Bears defense, maybe more than people might think when they're not generating the big plays and the turnover. So I'd say that the 24 maybe 20-21 range.
All right, let's switch over to the other side of the ball. Let's talk about the Bears offense. obviously we have to start by talking about Mitchell Trubisky. You were somewhat skeptical of him last time we talked. Remain skeptical. But he remains as, I think, the biggest difference still between his basic passing statistics and his Pro Football Focus grade, in terms of how that ranks out. So he's 60.1 or something in PFF's quarterback ranking in grade, which is below average, and he's doing all right in terms of raw passing statistics. Why the difference? What do you think about him?
Yeah, so you might be surprised to find out that Bears fans are really mad about low PFF grades for Mitchell Trubisky. I know it sounds crazy, but
weird.
Yeah, they get real fired up about that, and I get it. You look at Trubisky's last couple of games here. You talk about the game against the 49ers was actually a Chicago Bears record for completion percentage among, I think, you have minimum 16 pass attempts. No one's ever had that high of a completion percentage. Finished 25 of 29.
But I mean, you saw the passing chart.
Oh yeah, trust me, I've seen the passing chart the last 2 weeks. I mean, he's completing over 75% of his passes the last two games for a little bit over 200 or almost 250 in each game, and a passer ratings well over 115. And he's taking care of the ball, and this is kind of he's game managing. I mean, at this point, that's
an average
what it's
depth
been
of target
the last
of
couple
like
weeks.
3 yards over the last 2 weeks. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's an interesting kind of dynamic, right? Because completion rating is a useless statistic until we make it useful for us to demonstrate kind of whatever we want, right? But for the most part, It's not a great signifier of quarterback quality. And the Trubisky passing chart against the 49ers looks a lot like a Derek Carr passing chart from, I don't know, pick a week. It doesn't seem like he's making, in those games at least, and it doesn't seem like he's making particularly aggressive or difficult throws. Obviously, like last week he had like a 43-yarder to Allen Robinson. That was great. But for the most part,
even that one was a little bit overthrown, and Allen Robinson makes a diving catch to make that ball and injures his ribs on the dive, and he isn't practicing so far this week.
Okay, yeah. So Trubisky's bad. But yeah,
he's not bad.
No. Let's go in this direction. Why is he bad?
So, I guess to first answer one of the things you asked in the previous question about the discrepancy between PFF grade and sort of traditional box score stats, PFF has kind of found that that's the biggest indicator of strong scheme and strong offensive coaching and strong support staff around him, and being able to put him in a position where he doesn't have to make difficult throws. Basically the low PFF grade means he's not making very many difficult throws, and maybe there's a few negative throws in there as well, but not very many above and beyond throws, and he's still completing 86% of his passes for 250 yards and a touchdown. So which is just the ultimate signal of great staff around him, great play calling, great scheme, and great receivers making plays, and that ultimately is a lot of the discrepancy there. But yeah, at this point he's just a game manager, and that's all they need him to be when this defense plays that well. I mean, they beat the Los Angeles Rams with Trubisky at a 33.3 passer rating and 110 yards and 3 picks. I mean, if he takes away any of those interceptions, it was not even nearly as close as it was against the Rams. So, I mean, he is still going to make mistakes.
Some Cheez-It Bowl stuff, man.
That was some real Cheez-It Bowl stuff. There you go. But yeah, I mean, they just having him take care of the football, take the easy throws that are underneath, and he's going to take some shots. He's going to mix them in there, and hasn't necessarily been connecting on them as much, but they do like to try and not remain so horizontal and so one dimensional in that sense. But it's just a matter of getting some things going in the running game if they can, taking the little easy throws, and then red zone execution. I said about the defense, and it's been a big part of this Bears offense too, that they get down in the red zone, and they've been able to score touchdowns instead of field goals pretty consistently when they get down there, mostly because Cody Parkey keeps missing every field goal attempt they try, which is a little bit of a different story. But that they find ways to move the ball, and some of it's gimmicky and some of it's just taking the easy stuff underneath, but it's worked, and it continues to work. And eventually they're going to need Trubisky to make big plays, particularly I think when it comes to the playoffs. But right now they're surviving with some scrambles from him, some taking some easy throws, and letting your playmakers make plays.
Let's assume that the Bears want to like win this game in terms of the way that they call plays and how long they have their starters out there and stuff like that. Do you feel confident about Trubisky in a situation where he can't be a game manager? He has to be a creator. You're down 14 points, middle of the third quarter or something like that. Maybe it's not the defense's fault. It's 2 special teams touchdowns or whatever, right? It's a possibility that, he might have to shoulder the burden of creating those points instead of kind of allowing those points to appear as kind of just part of the process. Do you have confidence that he has the ability to do that and consistently make those deep intermediate throws?
My hesitancy might be my answer, but it's...
Is this more of a you don't know situation, or is it the evidence suggests otherwise situation?
It's more of a I don't know situation because we've seen both ways. We have seen times when he has been able to step up in some critical situations and make that key pass, or maybe it's scramble for the first down on third and medium to long and be somewhat of a playmaker at times. But there have been other games, particularly when the spotlight is big, like that Sunday night against the Rams, and even to some extent that Sunday night against the Vikings, when, you can see he's trying a little bit too hard and he gets a little jittery. He's not stepping into his throws and he's trying to make plays that aren't necessarily there instead of either taking what the defense gives him or, living to fight another down. So it's hard to say, is this Vikings game the type of situation where he's going to put that pressure on himself and try and do too much and make too many plays? Because the one thing to his credit is when he makes a mistake, whether it's a bad interception or a fumble or whatever, he is not afraid to come out in the very next throw and fire downfield. And he doesn't seem to necessarily let any of them affect him, at least immediately after, and have any kind of lingering effect. He's not afraid to come out and throw that second and third interception if he wants to. But it is a positive trait in that he has a short memory for those types of things. So he has shown evidence that he can step up and be more of a game manager at times. He's also shown evidence that sometimes those big situations can be too big for him. So it's hard to know how he stands about that now. He hasn't been put in those situations in really a few different weeks. So he's still growing. He's still learning, but it's not something the Bears necessarily want to have to find out.
All right, that's fair. Let's talk about people who are not Trubisky. We could talk about Tariq Cohen in a second. He's very exciting. But let's talk about the receivers first. I want to know, so we got a question in our mailbag asking kind of how close, how well is Allen Robinson playing this year, and how close is he to hitting his Jacksonville peak, and kind of what can you expect from him going forward?
Allen Robinson's been a little bit tough to pin down, and maybe it's not necessarily Robinson himself, but it's just this Bears offense spreads the ball around a lot, and I think more than most teams. Mitch feels pretty comfortable throwing to anybody, including backup offensive tackle Bradley Sowell catching a touchdown pass a couple weeks ago when they had 4 defensive linemen on the field in the red zone. I mean, they will put anybody out there and they will throw it to anybody. And so Robinson hasn't necessarily been that traditional number one receiver. He does lead the Bears in receiving yards, not catches, but yards, and I think yards per catch. Actually, Kevin White actually technically leads the Bears in yards per catch with 3 catches for 70 yards, because one was that Hail Mary at the end of the Patriots game, I think. But anyway, pretty much Allen Robinson still kind of the most, still the number one receiver, and makes some big plays and is always there when the Bears need him and when they go to him. But he's just not getting the usage that he may have gotten in Jacksonville when he was really at his peak. So at times it's hard to tell. And I mentioned that he's got the rib injury from that diving catch last week. So from what I remember, I don't think he practiced as of Wednesday, and he's probably going to be limited as the week goes on. So there's a chance he just doesn't play at all. But this Bears offense really just spreads the ball around to everybody. I mean, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys with 10 catches this season, and I I think the same number with over 100 yards, and I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4 guys with at least 4 touchdowns. So that, I mean, they really do spread it around, and that's kind of the point. That if you want to double team Allen Robinson, they'll throw to somebody else. If you want to put all your attention on Tariq Cohen, they'll throw to somebody else, and they just always seem to have somebody else there when Robinson's not maybe the top guy in the game plan. It does seem to kind of be a week to week variance thing where one game Allen Robinson will get 10 targets and 7 catches for 100 yards, and another week maybe he'll only get 2. And the Bears offenses seem to find success with or without any of their players in there, and I think that's just going to continue this week against the Vikings.
All right. Well, so I got a second question that Xavier Rhodes does. So he's was limited and did not participate in practice, at least on Wednesday. I didn't check on Thursday, but I don't believe he practiced on Thursday. Xavier Rhodes is unable to play. Who benefits the most? And I answered it was probably Allen Robinson, but I would like you to either lie or tell me that I'm right by saying it's Allen Robinson.
Yeah, it's probably Allen Robinson, but again, it's hard to really like pin that one matchup down because they're going to move them all around. They're going to run a lot of motion, and it's not like it's going to be Rhodes versus Robinson all day. And I think Taylor Gabriel's going to benefit some, and being able to maybe have a little bit more room to work downfield and have some confidence to take some shots there. But I do find myself leaning Allen Robinson just because he's kind of the guy. I mean, they've gone very light on wide receivers. They only have kept 4 active for game day, and last week 2 of them got ejected with a fight with Richard Sherman. So they finished that game with 2 active wide receivers, and you're going to see a lot of tight ends, you're going to see a lot of running backs first and foremost. So if with or without Xavier Rhodes, I think you're going to find your matchups perhaps elsewhere.
We also get another question. I know it's early to judge Nagy's coaching tendencies, but should we expect him to remain fairly aggressive on Sunday? And this question does take into account, maybe the likelihood that the Bears will rest starters, but that, maybe he still calls, aggressive plays. That, like, what is his kind of coaching tendency in that regard, do you think?
Yeah, so, in any other week, you're going to see a very aggressive play caller, and I don't know what to expect this week necessarily. He said the Bears are going to play to win, and they're going to be. His quote was, "They're going to be smart about it," and look at the Rams score at halftime and try and figure out maybe when they can rest some starters, if at all. But I am almost expecting starters for 4 quarters, and maybe he dials it back a tiny bit, and especially if with the possibility of playing the Vikings again next week, maybe he doesn't show his hand as much in terms of new packages of trick plays with 4 defensive linemen and 6 offensive linemen and a quarterback on the field. Maybe we'll see a little bit less of that kind of thing so they can still have a few tricks up their sleeve for next week. Maybe not a no fake punt or fake field goal this week, and just to kind of save those for the playoffs. But I would still expect aggressive passing, trying to get some downfield stuff going for it on 4th and shorts, and maybe pushing in the red zone a little bit and trying to just keep things as on schedule and as normal as possible. And I don't think he wants this team to, take the foot off the gas at all and then potentially have to recover or, get off of their usual kind of week-to-week preparation as they look forward to the playoffs. I think he just wants to be able to kind of let the whole thing keep rolling, whether it's week 16, 17, or the wild card game, have it be as consistent as it would be any other week of the season. So I would expect very little difference from Matt Nagy unless something does happen crazy with the Rams game and they just want to completely mail it in.
All right. Tell me about Anthony Miller. So
he leads the Bears in touchdowns this year, and I remember in the preseason he predicted, I don't remember if it was on Twitter or if it was a interview with a reporter, he said he's going to have at least 8 touchdowns this season, and everybody was like, oh yeah, okay, but he has 7, and he's going to be looking for that 8th one to hit that prediction in this game. But he got a lot of playing time early on, and probably, I don't have a good sense of the timeline, probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago, right around that Vikings game, maybe a little bit after, the Bears really dialed it back. And I don't know if he felt like he had too much on his plate, or they just felt like he had too much on his plate, but they felt like they were overdoing it with him a little bit too much, and they really dialed it back. And so he hasn't played nearly as much in the last few weeks. He's still their, number 3 receiver, but his snaps went from more like 60 a game to more like 30 a game. And they've been using Josh Bellamy a bit more as sort of that, number 3/number 4 receiver. Those two guys playing similar amounts of games, although they were the two that were ejected last week. So that I don't know. I don't think that'll have any kind of lingering effect into this one. But Miller is just kind of he's a good route runner. He's not the biggest or fastest guy in the world, but he's got decent speed, and he's 5'11", and just seems to get open and catch the ball, and he can kind of do a little bit of vertical, a little bit underneath, and move him around and do a little bit of everything. But I think they'll continue to keep him reserved a little bit and just not put too much on his plate. And maybe once the playoffs come around a little bit more, they might unleash him and try and throw something a little bit more that maybe defenses wouldn't have prepared for as much in recent weeks as his role has decreased. But for now, I wouldn't expect a ton, but maybe a touchdown in there that surprises you.
I wouldn't expect a ton, but maybe a touchdown.
Well, I'm talking like 2 catches and a touchdown. You know what I mean? Like that kind of, like last week, 3 catches, 24 yards and a touchdown. And against the Giants, 1 catch, 1 yard, touchdown. And against the Vikings the first time, 2 catches, right, 25 yards, touchdown. So that's kind of his thing. All he does is score points.
Fair enough. All right, let's move and talk about the tight ends. Obviously, the premier story here is that Adam Shaheen's been playing. But no, he's had 6 targets for the last couple of weeks. He's healthy now, right?
Yeah, they're working him.
Yeah, so how we'll talk about Trey Burton in a second, who's obviously more important. But how has he looked? I mean, it was kind of an interesting, what is it, a 2nd-round pick in maybe the most stacked tight end class I've seen ever. It was kind of a curious thing. And how has he looked since he's re-entered the roster?
So yeah, his first game back was actually against the Vikings in Week 11, and then I think he had a concussion in that game and missed the one after that. But has been a solid part of the rotation ever since. And you kind of look at the way he's been used. He's not necessarily their go-to passing weapon. When he's on the field, he's typically in there to block. Particularly in the running game, a little bit more of a run tendency than a pass tendency when he's on the field, and he's playing 40 to 50% of the last couple games and a couple targets in the last couple weeks, and he can make catches, but it's not all there yet. He's still a pretty raw tight end, out of Division II Ashland, 6'5", 270 for those who aren't familiar. And he got the baby Gronk is kind of the nickname that Bears fans like to use for him, which doesn't really fit for a guy with 5 catches and 48 yards this season, but he can be that red zone target. He's getting better as a blocker, and when they throw to him, he catches it and runs a little bit, but he's not an elite route runner. He's not a great separator, downfield just yet, but he's a big body. He can catch the ball. He can block a little bit, and he allows them to do more of that 2 tight end stuff that they like to do and just, show some of that bulk on the interior and work off different looks based out of that. But he's not particularly a worrisome threat at this point, but there's still a lot of hope that he can get there soon.
How many baby Gronks do we have at this point?
Probably as many baby Riverses as there are baby Gronks. I debated Riverses and Cromarties, but I went Rivers.
That was good. Well, Cromartie kind of rolls off the tongue, but Rivers is more contemporary. Difficult choice. I get it.
Well, I don't know if all the Cromarties are actually taking the last name Cromartie.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's a good point, too. Yeah. You got to work these jokes out. That's fair.
I'll be at the Comedy Club on Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. Tickets are available at the door for $10.
So Trey Burton, how important has he been to the function of the Bears offense? Feels like he's been pretty significant, but also I don't hear that much about him.
Yeah, I think it's weird because it never feels like he's that important, but he just kind of quietly racks up, 3 catches for 40 yards a game, somewhere around there. I mean, he's had a couple of big performances, but for the most part, it's converting a key third down here and there. It's, the nice touchdown catch in the red zone where he and Trubisky seem to be connecting pretty well, but he's never a focal part of the offense. And I think that's kind of the key indicator that he's there, and Trubisky will come back to him over the middle for some checkdowns and occasionally a couple things more downfield. But this is it's much more Tariq Cohen, Taylor Gabriel, Allen Robinson passing game than it is Trey Burton. And I struggle to say that he would be the actual 4th. If you're numbering which options Trubisky likes the best, I struggle to say he'd be the 4th, but I mean, he is 4th in receiving yards and I think 4th in catches glancing at it now. So, I mean, he is, but I don't know. It is a weird situation. I think you've read that right. That he's producing and he is important, but just not a focal point at this point.
All right. Well, let's move on to talk about my opinion, the most exciting member of the Bears offense, Tariq Cohen. I feel like he's the kind of player that they'll likely limit more than other players. I mean, excluding the injury report, which again I haven't looked at yet. But he seems like the kind of player that they would limit just because you have another running back option there. You can play him. Tariq Cohen's kind of explosive and maybe more important, and so maybe you kind of want to save him for the next week and so on. But am I reading that right? Is that, or maybe I'm just kind of projecting? I don't want to see Tariq Cohen on the field. And B, heard a lot about him last year. Heard a lot about him at the beginning of this year. I have not heard, maybe like Trey Burton, I have not heard that much about what Tariq Cohen has been able to do or has done offensively for the Bears the last couple of weeks. So what's the deal with that? Is he still significant?
Yeah, and it almost seems like Tariq Cohen is like the inverse of what I was saying about Trey Burton. That you're right. In recent weeks, Cohen hasn't necessarily been this totally dominant player. Against the Giants a few weeks ago in their loss, he had a huge game. But other than that, it's been muted at best. And last week against the 49ers, I mean, 6 carries for 12 yards and 1 catch for 7 yards. But it still feels like when he's on the field, the offense has a little bit more juice to it. And because he runs, 25 yards to pick up 2, it feels like he's doing more for the offense. It feels like he's making more plays, even when a lot of that effort is just behind the line of scrimmage. And at the very least, what he does is scares defenses, or at least threatens defenses to the point where it makes everyone else's job easier. That he's in motion a lot of times. He gets a lot of attention. You'll see wherever he is on the field, defenses are usually you see somebody point to him, whether he's at receiver or running back or even tight end. Sometimes they'll move him around a lot, and they'll do the trick plays with him as well, where he's kind of quarterback and run some triple options. So he is still a really important part of this offense. The big-time playmaking hasn't necessarily been there in recent weeks, and they've certainly been able to make up for it elsewhere. But I think defenses have done a better job of keying in on him, and maybe he's played some defenses that are just a little bit better suited and maybe don't have as many mismatch opportunities at linebacker and safety. And I would certainly put the Vikings in that same category, not really a team that's going to be too vulnerable to what Cohen can do, in my opinion. But there will be touches for him, and they will get him involved. But I'm not expecting him to be the total game breaker, but he will be significant enough for the Vikings defense to pay attention to, that maybe he can still create other opportunities for other receivers on the team.
Is Jordan Howard good?
Yes, but Jordan Howard's it's a yes, but okay. Jordan Howard is good, but Jordan Howard might not be great. Like you don't get a couple of 1,000-yard seasons back to back by accident. You don't almost lead the NFL in rushing in your rookie season with 1,300 yards. But I think a lot of his issues this year have been offensive line based, that this team has not run blocked very well. But at the same time, he really looks like a one-speed back out there. He's not particularly elusive. He's not necessarily that explosive. He just runs hard and picks up all the yards that are there, and there haven't necessarily been a lot of yards there. So, like I said, I do think a lot of it's offensive line based. I don't think they've run blocked very well, and it's made Tariq Cohen look better because he can create more out of nothing, but Jordan Howard does a good job of getting the most out of what is there, and there just hasn't really been a lot there for him.
Okay. I mean, that doesn't sound like... That sounds like a functional running back. That doesn't sound like a good running back. You got to sell me on him being good. You're just like, oh yeah, the yards aren't there. Shouldn't a good running back create yards?
I mean, I don't know if you could plug every running back in to the exact situations he's been in and get quite as many yards, but it's hard for me to sit here and say, okay, here is what Jordan Howard is really good at. Here's his specialty. His specialty is setting up blocks, particularly on like inside zone running. He's very good at kind of feeling out his blockers and making that cut and cutting through, but that doesn't necessarily always feel the same as creating yards for himself. And so it's just about running hard and running consistently, but that doesn't necessarily sell you on good running back. But so that's why, I mean, for sure he's not great, and I think he's how about borderline good at this point?
Sure. So that leads us, I think, into a pretty good conversation about the offensive line. You were talking about how maybe, they haven't been run blocking all that well, but it really feels like they've been doing a really good job. And maybe, this has to do with the short passing game or what Nagy's been able to scheme up. But from a raw number standpoint, from a pressure standpoint, they've been doing a pretty good job, or something has been doing a pretty good job in preventing pressure from getting to Trubisky. Ranks 25th of 30th in most pressures in the league, so I guess 6th in least pressured out of all these quarterbacks. And they've allowed like 100, I think Sam Monson just tweeted out, they've allowed 100 fewer pressures than the Arizona Cardinals have this season, which that's its own problem. But what is the offensive line like blocking well? It didn't seem like you were all that confident in the makeup of the offensive line last time we talked. And that wasn't like it was early in the season either. What has accounted for this low pressure rate, and should the Vikings be able to get pressure? Remember, last time they only got pressure some 32% of the time, which is about league average.
So it is a combination of things. I do think they are pass blocking well. Charles Leno at left tackle is having a pretty solid season. Cody Whitehair in the middle, a bounce back after a disappointing year last year. And even Bobby Massey at right tackle, long hated by Bears fans for being the weak link on the offensive line. He's had a surprisingly strong year in pass protection, which was kind of his weakness in recent years. So credit to the offensive line coach, Harry Houston, who gets a lot of love for what he does. And then, the guards, James Daniels is a rookie, and rookie second-round pick out of Iowa, and playing kind of like a rookie offensive lineman, like you might expect. And then Kyle Long might actually return for this game. He is on injured reserve. He is practicing again this week, and Matt Nagy has not ruled it out having him play. I would expect that he won't, just because
that sounds like a waste.
The game doesn't have a ton of meaning, but he will for sure play in the wild card week if the Bears don't somehow earn a first round bye from the Rams losing and win this game. We will see Kyle Long again on the field soon, and his replacement Brian Witzman, I believe, was a former Viking. Is that right?
Yeah, he was on the Vikings this year.
Earlier this year,
yeah.
And he's actually played surprisingly well the last couple of weeks.
Of course he has.
He was brutal when he first went in. I mean, he looked terrible for probably 3, 4, 5 games in a row. But like starting against the Rams of all teams with Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald, he didn't allow a single pressure in that game. And the last 3 weeks, he's allowed 2 total pressures, and really holding up better in pass protection. I haven't really, I haven't like sat down and isolated him and looked at the last 3 games to figure out, okay, what exactly has been different for Brian Witzman, because I just don't think Brian Witzman deserves that much effort at this point. But I'm not that much of a film nerd that I'm going to sit and go through the backup right guard over and over again with Kyle Long about to be here. But anyway, but he's been better.
Not going to watch Drew Brees in the Pro Bowl. Yeah.
I'm gonna chart Drew Brees' passing in the Pro Bowl and let you know about his accuracy, and get the radar gun out for that too. But anyway, yeah. So they've just been playing well, and I think coaching is a big part of that. But I also think Trubisky has gotten rid of the ball very quickly and has also drastically improved his pocket presence, where quarterback play can influence how the offensive line does. And I know Trubisky has been blamed for a number of his sacks this season, so they don't count as pressures against the Bears offensive line by PFF's numbers. But yeah, Trubisky, 9 sacks are credited against him. And I don't have the numbers to say that's the most in the NFL, but I would venture a guess that it's top 5, for sure, top 10 most sacks directly blamed on the quarterback. So that's a factor as well. He's getting better in pocket presence, but he's also when he does hold on to the ball too long, it doesn't necessarily make it the offensive line's fault. And so I think it's just kind of a combination of better play, getting rid of the ball more quickly, and the quarterback being at fault when they do allow some of the pressure that they do.
All right. That covers most things. Assuming that the offense is trying to win, how many points do they score against the Vikings defense?
It's hard. This is hard because I think these two teams are obviously pretty darn close. I was surprised the Vikings were such high Vegas favorites, but I'm guessing there's some anticipation of low stakes for the Bears here. So, if I'm putting the Vikings at 21 to 24 points, I feel like I need to put the Bears in a similar range, and I'm not even sure who I necessarily think is going to win this game, which might be the question coming in a minute. But I'm putting them in the similar 21. I think this game ultimately ends up, 24-20, 21-24, 23-20, something along that range where it's less than a touchdown difference between these two teams, and somebody at the end makes whoever has the ball last is going to win the game, that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay. That sounded way more dismissive. No, I agree. Okay, well, so then I'm not going to ask who you think is going to win. I'm instead going to ask a more relevant question. How likely is it that the Bears will take their foot off the gas pedal partway through the game or even early on in the game because it's relatively low stakes, especially if the Rams win?
So I think I'm torn on this, as you might be able to tell by my hemming and hawing there. If the 49ers, or if the Rams were playing the Cardinals instead of the 49ers, I would say, oh yeah, the Rams are going to smoke them absolutely, and the Bears will be much more inclined to take their starters out. But I do think Matt Nagy is going to be particularly hesitant and really require a significant Los Angeles Rams lead to really take the foot off the gas at all in this game. And even so, I mean, I'm not anticipating a lot of that. I don't think he wants to send that message to the team if he can avoid it. Like he said, he wants to be smart about it and not leave anybody out to get hurt and hang out to dry. But I also don't think he wants to take the foot off the gas. That's just not his style as a coach. So I would expect that the most likely thing is that the Rams game won't be so one-sided that he would want to pull starters anyway. But even so, even if the Rams game starts to look one-sided, I would guess it needs to be 35-0 before the Bears would really consider pulling their starters. Because if it's still, just even like a 3-touchdown game, you never know what happens in the NFL. And Matt Nagy will not be the coach that pulls his starters when the Rams are winning and then ultimately looks like a fool when the Rams blow their lead and lose the game and the Bears miss out on a first-round bye. So I think the chances of the Bears actually pulling their starters are a little bit low, but it's not minuscule either. I think it's just on the lower half. I think you're going to see the Bears pretty much play hard for 4 quarters.
All right, so that's interesting. Do you think that's important that the coach send that message to the team, or do you think that that's, I'm not going to say like coaching hoo-ha or anything like that, but do you think that's maybe kind of overstated?
It's, I think if you'd asked me that question years ago when I was young and naive, I might say it was a little. I mean, I don't know. I don't know,
man. You're like 16 years old right now. What are you talking about?
I just got my license last year. Okay, I'm driving. No, but I think it's kind of a team by team thing, and this, I think with this Bears team, energy is a big thing for them, and so I think with Matt Nagy and with this team, it's important. I think it does mean something to them to be able to keep fighting hard, and that they kind of ride and die together, and they've had their ups and downs already, and they don't want to put themselves in any position to feel down or to get overconfident or feel like, oh, well, we're good enough, so we don't have to keep trying as hard. I think it's important for them to maintain that high effort, but I don't necessarily know if that's true for every team. I think, like a Bill Belichick, Tom Brady Patriots team, maybe that's a little bit less so. But I think for this Bears team, given that they're kind of overachieving at this point and they still kind of feel like underdogs. I mean, well, they are in this game, but even to the rest of the NFL, I think it is important for them to kind of keep that up and to maintain that sort of mentality and that aggression to keep it rolling and ride the momentum that analytics people will tell you is fake. Ride that momentum into the playoffs.
All right. Well, hey, thanks so much for again another extended episode where we break down another team. You've been wonderful, and it's always great to get guests in that not just know what they're talking about. We're pretty passionate about it. So I'll let you plug whatever you want to plug. If you got a piece you've written recently, or you just want to plug your podcast, and be sure to follow Lorin Cox at Cox Sports 1, and that's the number 1, not the letter, not the word.
Not the word. Yeah, and I always appreciate your appreciation of my Twitter handle, because most people just kind of totally blaze over it. But you are the number one fan of my Twitter handle out there.
The number one fan of Cox Sports 1.
So I always appreciate that my fellow intelligent man gets the joke. And I feel like it goes over some people's head, and they're like, "Oh, like Fox Sports won." And I guarantee there's someone listening to this podcast going, "Oh, like Fox Sports won." But but anyway, yeah. So on that Twitter handle, you'll see my podcast, Locked On Bears, and my Bears writing at NBC Sports Chicago and Bears Wire as well. And yeah, you can, now that I have my driver's license, I can drive you around Minneapolis in my mom's van. For the record, I am not 16 years old. I am a college graduate. Thank you very much.
Graduate? Well, that's better than me. I never graduated, so.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, no, it's not for me. So
doing the podcast with Bill Gates. Wow.
Yeah, right. That's how it works. You drop out of college.
Arif
Bill
Gates.
God, sounds awful.
Where's your Microsoft? What is Arif Hassan's Microsoft?
It's got to be Trubisky can't throw left, but unfortunately, the real Microsoft has some success. The Trubisky can't throw left TM, working on it. Doesn't
put you on
look
Shark
like
Tank, get some investors.
Yeah, I got to get some VC going. All right, thanks so much for calling in, man. Appreciate it.
Let's go to the mailbag, and the first question is from Kenneth Allen, who asks, I know it's early to judge Nagy's coaching tendencies, but should we expect him to remain fairly aggressive on Sunday?
That's really curious because we haven't seen him in a position where he's going to potentially be playing the same team next week. So how aggressive you are kind of is defined by what types of things that are characterized as aggressive that you can put in the game plan that you're willing to not have to worry about kind of next week not being in the game plan. So it's already a cop-out to say it's too early to say, but it's also, I'm going to additionally layer on another cop-out where we have no idea kind of how aggressive one can be in the situation. We've seen games where teams are likely to kind of play each other the next week and they don't look the same at all. So obviously the Packers, Vikings have done that a couple of times, I think twice over the past decade. We saw I want to say the Ravens and the Bengals do it.
I can remember a 2-week span. Yeah, it was a 2-week span of where the Cowboys played, I believe, the Eagles. And the game plan switched so drastically between the two that one ended up winning one game and the other ended up winning the other.
Right. And so it's difficult to say because I think that this first game plan for a game that matters just a lot less to the Bears, that they'll pull out any incredibly kind of high risk, high reward stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're aggressive in the sense that they're going to go for it on fourth down. They're going to try and, hit 2-point conversions early and stuff like that. I think that will likely remain consistent.
Next question from Fourth and Skull, who asks, how will the offensive attack look different this time for the Vikings? And what might the Bears do differently to avoid turnovers like the last game?
Well, the Vikings are keeping things simple. I know that they tried to de-emphasize, quote unquote, how simple it would look. But they have clearly kept to a very limited playbook. And I think that they're going to focus on kind of out-executing over, out-tricking, their opponent, which obviously, the Bears have just kind of had kind of an opposite philosophy where they try and scheme as many new looks that the defenses haven't seen and exploit kind of those advantages. But the Vikings, I think, will kind of keep to a formula of a smaller playbook. And obviously, they're going to run the ball more until it becomes impossible to run the ball and stuff like that. So I think those are kind of the offensive approaches that will change. I think we'll see kind of depending on the back end coverage. I think we'll see a lot of very similar concepts against the same types of coverage and just forcing the Bears to kind of cheat one way or the other until, it breaks open another receiver being open on kind of the same route concept.
Really, for the Bears, the question is this a defense you want to play twice? Play twice in a very short period of time?
Right. Well, do you mean, do the Bears want to play the Vikings defense twice, or do the Vikings want to play the Bears defense twice?
Well,
because both of those are pretty tough.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, if for the Bears anyway, your offensive line has held up fairly well this year. Is this a defense you really want to be facing twice in a row? The Vikings don't have much of a choice, but the Bears have the ability to shut this down.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I think kind of offensively, in terms of the Bears trying to dictate things, I think that they're likely going to. I have no idea. This is just a feeling, but I think they're likely going to be kind of risk averse and try to show less. And so they're not going to try and I don't know, manipulate the results so it's less likely that they play the Vikings, which in this case would, I think, mean win and then hope the Eagles win, right? So that they wouldn't have to face the Vikings. But I think it's more likely that, hey, there's like, some percentage odds chance that they'll play the Vikings, some like 40% chance that they play the Vikings, I think. And so they just don't want to screw up that potential matchup when they've got a big influence on kind of what the Vikings will see being put on film.
Yeah. Next question is from Josh Swedland, who asks, on the TV broadcast last week, one of the guys in the booth mentioned how the Vikings might want to move Reef to guard next year. Even though I believe that would be a bad move, out of curiosity, does Reef have skills that would fit a move to guard in a zone blocking scheme?
So I kind of wish that I had heard, or because so at the time I was booth casting, which means that I was doing my own kind of separate broadcast of the game over an iOS app that I've joined their team. It's Boothcast. Download it. But I was talking over the broadcast, only listening to what they were saying when I needed clarification on kind of, what the call was on the field or something like that. So I talked over them for most of the game. And so I didn't actually hear this conversation. For the most part, I thought that when the broadcast team was kind of describing, who Mike Zimmer is and kind of what the Vikings are about and all that, I thought they were pretty out of touch. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this was, and I kind of wish I had heard the way that they had framed this, because if they said, we've heard from the Vikings that they're planning on, that's different than if they said, one wonders, with Brian O'Neill playing so well, are they going to move Riley Reef to guard? And I think that that's less likely. I do think that he's probably a better fit for a move to guard than Mike Remmers, who just doesn't have, I think, the quick reaction time that you kind of need inside a phone booth that you'll have at guard versus tackle, where you can be a little bit more patient. I mean, he's a little bit better at that, but I don't think he has as much functional strength either. So I don't think that a switch to guard would be all that useful for him. So plus you're sacrificing, I think, a lot of his kind of lateral agility, his lower body agility. So I don't know that that's a good idea, but it's probably a better idea than having moved Remmers. But you paid Arif to be a left tackle, and so you weren't going to move him.
Next question is from Adam West, who asks, are you resting your takes and analysis in anticipation of a rematch next week?
No. I'm just... It was just Christmas, man. I just didn't have that many takes.
Were you able to receive food on the left? Like, was it intercepted by anyone, or was that like...
Hey, apparently Trubisky can throw a left. I'm going to be on a podcast with athletic writer Kevin Fishbane, who writes about the Bears. And he's been making fun of my throw left takes, kind of subtweeting me, actually, for a while now. So we'll see if that comes up during this podcast. But apparently Trubisky can throw left now.
Apparently. That's a thing now. Eddie asks, which Bears receiver benefits the most if Rhodes isn't able to go on Sunday? How close is Allen Robinson to reaching his Jacksonville peak, and do you think he can surpass that during a tenure in Chicago?
I'll answer the Allen Robinson one first. I think I don't think he's ever going to hit his Jacksonville peak, but I think he's playing really well, actually. And I think maybe not nearly as close as that, but I think he's getting as close to, what was his 2015 season, I think, as he can get. So I think that it's very likely that he's the benefactor of a potential Rhodes injury. And so there's a lot of Vikings injuries, right? So you've got Rhodes out, you've got Kendricks out, you've potentially got Remmers out, CJ Ham out. But defensively, Rhodes is the one that is maybe the biggest concern. Other than that, it's not as if Gabriel Taylor is going to be kind of the primary responsibility that Rhodes would have had. So I think it's likely Allen Robinson. Obviously, you're always going to have to worry about like Trey Burton and stuff like that, but that's usually not Rhodes' assignment. So, I think Robinson benefits the most. you'd end up putting you probably don't end up putting Trey Waynes on him just because of the size issue. You might end up putting Holton Hill on him. And that'll be interesting to see because Holton Hill's had 3 or 4 really good games and 2 pretty bad games. And we'll kind of see kind of what end of the spectrum that falls on for him.
Next question is from Cuppa Joe, who asks, given the Vikings' history, how much alcohol should I have on hand to prepare myself for the possible unfortunate outcome? I would say all of it.
Yeah, have all the alcohol ready. I think only have half of it ready for a Vikings loss, and have the other half ready in case the Vikings not only lose, but I think the Eagles win, which might kick the Vikings out. I mean, I don't really know how the tiebreaker works here, but the Vikings don't have a 100% chance of making the playoffs, and the Eagles are the only one closest. So I imagine that that's the scenario.
Yeah. Don from Ohio asks, what was the best movie either of you saw this last year?
It's definitely Into the Spider-Verse. Holy crap. What a good movie. And I just saw A Quiet Place yesterday, which is really good. But Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse it's just incredible. If you are sick of Marvel movies, if you're sick of Spider-Man reboots, if you just don't like superhero movies, or if you don't think animated movies can be all that good, I actually understand all of that except the last one. Just get over yourself if you just don't think animated movies can be good. But I understand like all of these things. I think you should put all of that aside to watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Not because like, oh, it's so good, right? But because it's just different in character from all of those things, that the things that you don't like about those movies, maybe you think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is like tired and they're telling the same story and it looks bleak or whatever, right? Maybe, I can understand if maybe you didn't want to see Avengers 4 or whatever. But Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is a totally different feel. It's got really fast-paced storytelling. It's got a great mixture of like these emotional moments and hilarious moments and levity, great character moments, really, really great writing, and it's just a visual stunning masterpiece. I thought the soundtrack was great. The sound design was really good. I guess the soundtrack has split people because like there's a lot of people that are like really into like in depth into like rap and hip hop and stuff like that know way more about the genre than I do, that are just like, this soundtrack is just like an acid trip. I don't know, man. It's a mess. And I'm just like, I really feel it. It's really good. So I'm not a music guy, so I'm not the person to ask about that, but I thought it was good. Yeah, it's a great movie. I mean, I see people come out of the theaters, not just like people that I'm in the theater with, but like people like tweeting that they just saw the movie saying, hey, I think this is the best Spider-Man movie. And that includes like Spider-Man 2 and Homecoming, obviously. Or people tweeting this might be the best. I tweeted that it might be a top 3 Marvel property movie. I saw someone say it was the best movie they've seen. And it's like, this guy is sometimes prone to hyperbole, so maybe he's joking, but like he's serious a lot of the time. So I don't know. So it's great. Watch it.
So is this where I say that the Star Wars spinoff Solo was my favorite movie, and just like see a reaction from anyone?
Christ.
It wasn't.
I liked it, but like I can't imagine that being anyone's favorite movie ever. Like it's like that. Yeah, I like generic movie X. It was great.
It was
my favorite Transformers movie was 3. Like it's like saying that. Like, okay, I didn't watch that, so I don't know, maybe.
That was a little too on the nose. Actually, the one that I saw this year, it didn't come out this year. It came out actually in 2015, but it was more available this year. Was my Scientology movie. Louis Theroux did that. I believe it's on Netflix. Have you had a chance to watch this one by the way?
No, but it's on my list.
Yeah,
so
it's
planning on. Yeah.
It's fantastic. They actually do a lot of the they reshoot a lot of the like the way that things are like broadcast in Scientology, and it's a wonderful documentary / horror film, because they are constantly being chased by the Scientologists that they are trying to film, or they are trying to like be shut down in all of these different ways, and it's really entertaining. It's really, really interesting stuff, and the footage they got was astoundingly good. So it's when the Scientologists show up to the soundstage that they're recording at, and they're acting odd and trying to like hire like fake like cops and everything. It's really worth the watch. Otherwise, I did enjoy Avengers 4. And the worst movie I saw this year, I think, was the newest Jurassic Park movie, which I came across a clip of a pre-show thing where you and I were talking about it, or I told you how much I hated it, and it still remains true. It's still so terrible. The girlfriend is a gigantic Jurassic Park fan, and it's like her favorite movie. And so when the new one came out, we had to see it in the theater. And she saw it opening night without me because I had something going on or I was sick.
So is the new one Jurassic World 2?
Yes.
Electric Boogaloo?
Something like that.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, you're not missing anything.
Okay.
The plot has more holes than fine Swiss cheese. Like, it is so terrible that...
That's not surprising.
Oh, which is funny because I really liked the first Chris Pratt Jurassic Park movie, and the second one we just spent the next like 2 hours after watching the movie just making fun of how bad it was. Like she wanted.
Oh, so she was okay. That's good.
Yeah, she accepted.
That she wasn't like in love with it, and you were like, "This movie is bad," and
no,
it's like
that's
my
the
husbandly
worst
duty to point this out to you.
Well, yeah, that's the worst type of relationship situation to be in. Is like when one of you really likes the movie and the other one doesn't, and like actively hates it, and so you have to tiptoe because you don't want to get into a fight about it, or you're just gonna go for broke and be like, "This is the hill I'm gonna die on." That performance was terrible. But that was not the case in this case. She saw it, and she went, "Holy crap, this is so bad. We have to see this again."
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and so we spent the next 2 hours after that going, "How could the woods support the dinosaurs when the dinosaurs are walking across it? They're too heavy." Like it would just be like rants about that. It was so funny. But yeah, that was probably the worst movie I saw this year.
That's yeah, fair enough. I don't even know what the worst movie I saw this year was. I saw some pretty bad movies. Which is, I mean, that's always the case. But I don't know. My girlfriend's really into like Jupiter Ascending, which is like just awful. It's like, I mean, have you seen or heard of it?
I have not.
So Mila Kunis is Mila Kunis is a long lost queen of an alien civilization that. They try. I don't know. That someone tries to assassinate her. She doesn't know. She's like cleaning toilets or whatever. And they try to assassinate her. And Channing Tatum saves her. And he's a dog alien. He's like an alien, but a dog. But also Channing Tatum. So he's like a really sexy dog, I guess. Anyway, she falls in love with the dog. And is the queen. It's a tough movie to describe. I don't think I've spoiled anything. I think all of that's in the trailer. So yeah, but it's stunning, right? It's kind of like, I mean, I think it's a Wachowski movie, and you know, Speed Racer visually is like, it's like drinking Rockstar energy drink for the first time. You're either really into it or you're really not, but it's candy sweet. And this kind of reminds me of that. So maybe that's why it appeals to her. I can't talk about the movie to her, but that might be one of the worst movies I've like had to. She saw for a second time with me, right? Like she was like, "We're watching this," and I was like, "That looked awful." Its Rotten Tomatoes rating is probably like 2%. So other people think it's awful. Not that Rotten Tomatoes is like a great arbiter for whether or not, you know, people are going to like the movie, but whatever. It seems bad. It's confirmed to be bad by other people, and now we're watching it. And she's like, no, it's great. We watch it, and I'm just like, this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Anyway, that's my story.
All of a sudden it feels, all of a sudden it's like, no, you really have to listen to these people. It's called Dianetics. You just go to a couple of meetings, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
Bring your
clear
check.
out your Thetans.
Exactly. Bring out your checkbook. It'll be great. We're going on the high seas. Also, why does Arif have two favorite NFL teams, the Vikings and the Seahawks? Why can't he pick just one and stay with it, like his Eastern Washington Eagles, who will play and defeat NDSU next week?
Look, first of all, I'm not committed to any team as much as I am to the Eastern Washington Eagles, my lifelong team. But I'm not a Seahawks fan. I don't know how else to. I don't.
Do you have to be a fan of it to be a blogger for them?
Well, it turns out no. I think a guy who's a Cowboys blogger is a Seahawks fan. The reason I know that is because Seahawks fans have violently and against my will inducted me into Seahawks Twitter, where a lot of I'm tweeted at by a Cowboy Stats account that I'm pretty sure they write about the Cowboys, but they are Seahawks fans. I don't know, man. So I guess not. But I'm not any of those things.
I feel like it would be better if you had like an adverse relationship with the team. Like you hate the Cowboys, but you have to cover them. So like all of your takes are like begrudging support.
Right.
Like, I hate this team so goddamn much. Like, all your tweets are just about, like, wow, he could, like, are just passive-aggressive, like, Minnesota Lutheran style, like, boy, he couldn't have caught that if he tried, could he? Oh, boy, another overthrow from Kirk Cousins. Darn shame. Couldn't have seen that coming from the snap. Boy, Riley Reef just gets pushed around so much. It's almost like that's what he enjoys doing. Like if you were just in a situation where you absolutely like loathe the team so badly, but you needed the paycheck, I feel like that could either be, and like Tom Waits constantly plays in the background whenever you're watching the games, like just the saddest music you could possibly play. I feel like we're developing a screenplay right now. This could be interesting. It can't be the Vikings though, because that would just be too on the nose. No one would believe that. It would have to be Seattle. Oh, see, or we can cast you for the Seattle version of this game. Okay, we'll talk about this after the game, after the show. Next question is from Beef Brewski, who asks, who would win in a surly Luddite competition? Bill Belichick, Bob Wiley, or Mike Zimmer?
So I think in kind of a Luddite competition, it would be Mike Zimmer. Like I think he's the most clearly anti-technology, invading analog spaces guy out of those three.
In case people haven't heard why this is topical, can you explain the tweet that you put out about this?
Oh yeah, it's so funny. So in a story in Sports Illustrated, Mike Zimmer is talking about like the new Vikings facility, and inside the story, it says, Coach Mike Zimmer tolerates these new digs, even if some of the more lavish touches make him squirm. He never allows anyone to turn on the fireplace in the locker room, for instance, or to put anything other than the day's schedule on the dozens of TVs scattered throughout the facility. Players win games, the 62-year-old says one day in Egan, scoffing at the amenities. Asked about the new draft room with its 40 big screens all stitched together, everything digitized, he says, $750,000 just so we don't have to use fucking magnets. Wow.
Well,
you're not like wrong.
Is this like the whole conversation in The Big Lebowski? Like, you're not wrong, but
I mean, there's like a lot to it, and who knows if he's reporting like an accurate number for how much it costs and stuff like that. So, like, who knows? I mean, there's a bunch of benefits to having a digital draft board over an analog one. But yeah, I would say Zimmer takes the cake there in terms of being Luddite, but in terms of being just like a weird old man, definitely Bob Wiley, who was the offensive line coach for the Cleveland Browns. We saw him in Hard Knocks. And he was talking about how he would build an offensive line like out of rhinos and stuff. It was like extremely good, man.
That's an idea that hasn't caught on quite yet. Final question is from Kyle Slaby, who asks, which player loses us this game? Is it a Kirk pick six during a potential game-winning drive? Is it a last-second missed field goal? Is it a Trubisky Hail Mary to the left as time expires? Is it a Brian O'Neill holding call negating a last-second touchdown? Is it a Harrison Smith getting clowned for an offensive or for a touchdown?
I think it's the Trubisky one, because I think that the way this game happens, it unfolds in a way to hurt me personally the most. So it's got to be the Trubisky throwing left, not even a Hail Mary, like, because Hail Marys you can dismiss. Throwing left on like maybe a 25, 30-yard pass, bullet right in between like two defenders.
Fox,
right? Yeah, and it can be Harrison Smith is one of them. So
Fox interviewing him on the field after the game, specifically calling you out. Well, I heard I couldn't throw left against the Vikings this year, so I wanted to just prove to myself and prove to all the haters, and a specific hater in mind, that I could throw left and it would and I could score. So I just wanted to make sure that we put an exclamation point on this season.
Yeah. that would be how it happens.
Yeah, that seems the most damaging to your brand. We'll go with that. All right, that is going to be it for this episode. Arif, what do you have to plug for us?
I've got a story on Adam Thielen coming up at The Athletic. Hopefully that'll be up by the time most of you listen to this, although some of you listen to it like immediately on Thursday night. You won't get access to it, I'm sorry. But our most dedicated listeners are the worst, so you don't get access to the article. Normal people get access to it, though, so you'll get that.
I just like that. Our most dedicated people are the worst people to listen. That's a darn shame. Well, it was a nice podcast to be on, but sadly this appears to be the end of Norse Code. So that'll be it for Arif. My name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please remember to tweet that, even if it is a work in progress. And we will see you next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.